God morgon allihopa. Här är Peter Alberius, ordförande för Handelskammaren Sverige-Israel. Vad trevligt att se er här allihopa. Idag har jag äran att introducera en väldigt spännande talare, Magnus Schöldtz från Wallenberg, internationell rådgivare till Wallenberg-familjen. But as we have a lot of international speakers today, or international participants, we chose to run this webinar in English. And that is one of the opportunities, of course, or challenges with this pandemic, that we can't see each other in real life. We long to see each other in real life. On the other hand, through the digital meetings that we are forced to have, we have seen the great opportunity to welcome both speakers and listeners from all across Sweden, of course, and from Israel. So those from you tuning in from Israel, a special welcome, of course. Before we get going, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the sponsor of today, Karl-Erik Olsson, who makes this recording possible. So if you want to return to the webinar at a later instance, there is of course a recording on our YouTube channel. Without further ado, Magnus Schöldtz, please join me here, and international advisor to the Wallenberg family, and of course we are very much looking forward to listening to your perspective from Wallenberg family, Wallenberg Group, in both listening to the current organization of the group, of course, but also your special interest in the high-tech startup scene and other opportunities in Israel and the Middle East. And I'm sure you will also comment on the recent Abraham Accords and your perspective of these opportunities in the broader perspective of the Middle East. So thank you. The floor is yours, Magnus.
Thank you, Peter, and ambassadors and ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor to be here with the Swedish Israel Chamber of Commerce, and I'm also happy to see Peter and Marie-Claire, who you maybe don't see right now, but who are also with me here in this room. It's a great honor. I'll give you a few seconds about my personal background. I'm what I used to say a recycled diplomat, and I spent 16 good years within foreign service, and a lot of that time I spent with questions related to the Middle East. So I will at the end return a little bit more to the political and regional context as we see it today. I've been with the Wallenberg family for the last 9.5 years, and as such I operate as their advisor in international and government affairs. So it's a great honor for me to be here with you, and I truly hope that this will be interactive as the digital instruments would allow us. And I'm very curious to get your views on how we could improve even further the collaboration between Sweden and Israel, our respective businesses, as we go forward. I think it's appropriate to start with a few words on Raoul Wallenberg, since I do represent the Wallenberg family. And with that, I have to go back a little bit in history and explain the family tree of the Wallenberg family. As you probably know, Raoul was the son of a father who he never saw, who actually died before Raoul was born, also named Raoul. And his grandfather was Gustav Wallenberg, and as you also might know, he was a diplomat. He belonged to what we from the industrial branch of the family would call the second generation. He was, Gustav was the son of André Oskar Wallenberg, who actually then founded the SEB, what is today the SEB Bank. And it's worth mentioning that André Oskar was very proficient in producing children. I think he had 21 children, so Gustav was one of them. And as you might also know, Raoul had not a too successful business career and was seeking his identity before he got this assignment with the Swedish embassy in Budapest, and he, in the very few months that he spent there, managed to be part of the rescue operation of tens of thousands of Jewish people. And then, sadly, as you know, also disappearing, sucked into the Soviet system and the war machine that was taking over Budapest at the time, and disappearing into the prison system. And of course, this sad tragedy has haunted the family in all aspects. But I also say this just in order to, when I say I represent the Wallenberg family, of course there are more immediate family members, relatives of Raoul, who have the primary responsibility of representing Raoul himself, not least Nina Lagergren, as long as she was with us, then now her grandchildren, who represent the Raoul Wallenberg family. But I do wish to say that the Wallenberg family, the industrial branch of it, with its foundations, has continuously supported both the efforts of trying to find out the truth about Raoul's fate in the Soviet system, working with their means and their ways of putting pressure on the Soviet and later the Russian administrations to get more clarity about what happened. But we also support the Raoul Wallenberg Academy, as you know, and the Raoul Wallenberg Institute, headquartered in the beautiful city of Lund in the south of Sweden. So I think I'll stop there on Raoul, but I think it's worth mentioning. On that note, I'd also give you the backdrop of the Wallenberg group or the Wallenberg sphere, which is not in any way a conglomerate in the more international sense, but it is what we call an ecosystem. We have at the top the Wallenberg Foundations, so another of the second generation Wallenbergs, Knut Wallenberg, had no children of his own, and he was a very successful banker, and he set up the Knut and Elise, his wife, Wallenberg Foundation in 1917. And being one of the richest men in Europe at the time, that foundation has, through good management of its funds and assets, growing constantly. And together with other foundations added later on, we are now the second biggest private sponsor of R&D in Europe, second to the Wellcome Trust of the UK, as you probably know of. And we distribute approximately 2.5 billion Swedish crowns every year. According to the bylaws, we do that mainly to Swedish institutions and universities. But of course, they in their turn have an extensive collaboration with universities and institutes around the globe. And so that is in itself not a limitation. The priorities of the foundations in research and development, always seeking for excellence, is today mainly devoted to autonomous systems and artificial intelligence. That is the main program going on, which is relevant for our discussion later on. And but also to something more close to the Swedish hearts and the Nordic hearts, maybe wood science, which we believe will have a very bright future when we have to switch from fossil-based materials to renewables. And also to life science. With this, and of course, this money does not appear by magic. They stem from the revenues of the holdings of various companies, which is then administered through two holding companies. Investor AB is, as you know, a publicly listed company, open for everybody, and then which is the main holding vehicle for the assets, and where the family has often the biggest, they are the biggest private shareholders of companies like ABB, AstraZeneca, Atlas Copco, Ericsson, Electrolux, SKF, Saab Defense Group, SEB, the bank, of course, but yet another long range of such well-known and listed companies. And also fully owned companies of medium size under the umbrella within the Investor AB company called Patricia Industries, where you have a long range of medium-sized and very promising companies that are fully owned or owned in some sort of joint venture with other main big owners. We then have the fully owned holding company called FAM, and they have, among the big listed companies, they have SKF, as I mentioned, but also Stora Enso, the pulp and paper company, and then again a range of medium-sized companies which are very promising and developing at high pace. And of course, it is the revenues from these companies that ultimately enables the foundations to give out these significant sums every year. And just to finish off that description of the ecosystem with a little bit of bragging, it is so significant that when the Swedish government writes its research bill to Parliament, it takes into account the Wallenberg Foundation's contribution, because both the priorities therein and the volume of the money are so significant that it affects everybody else in setting their priorities. And that is also, I would say, the kind of third pillar. The Wallenberg family members would describe themselves, if you ask them, as bankers and industrialists. But it also gives them, of course, legitimacy in society, where they are well off as individuals, but the bulk of the wealth and the assets that they control are stuck with the foundations, and they cannot run away with it. So their duty in life is to administer these assets, these holdings, this ambition to contribute to what is in the very old bylaws of the foundations, to the betterment of Sweden, as it says. A ring of the 1910s and the early 1900s, when you spoke with such language. But it also is the starting point for something that we are incredibly proud of in Sweden, and the so-called triple helix model, where you have an ecosystem of business, government and academia all working together. And of course, many, as you noted, many of these priorities given to research from the foundations have, how should I put it, they resonate with the industrial base of Sweden. But it's important to note that they are actually about basic science and not applied science. But as the ecosystem works its way through academia, business and government, of course, out of that you have a beautiful design with also very successful and promising companies who all, at least if they belong to the Wallenberg group or the as companies associated with us, all spend an awful lot on innovation when they do their business. I think the first rule in the boardrooms of these companies is that they must prove themselves being innovative. And I'm speaking to the already converted here, but it cannot be overstressed how important this R&D drive is with all the companies. And it is a lesson learned for a small company working, a small country working in a global context. As you know, the Swedish market is insignificant. It would never carry the day for any company with aspirations beyond its own borders. And therefore, we need to be best, not because we can bully our way through as the big countries can or rely on the internal market to scale up, but we really have to be at on top of the game in order to be competitive. So hence this, I would say, the trademark of the Wallenberg Group is its drive for innovation. Therefore, it's fantastic to be in this Israeli context, and I'll give you a few reasons why we think Israel is such a fantastic place. Of course, I think to start with, its people. As we know, with the history of the Jewish people and of Israel as a state, we know that if you can carry nothing else with you, you can always carry what you have in your brain and your knowledge. And I think that is also the key for the success that we have seen in Israel. And we very much admire that drive for to constant upskill, reskill, and yourself. But in more recent days, I think the rediscovery of all of this fortune took place, if I relate to my superiors within the family, with the EVA, the Royal Academy of Engineering Sciences. EVA had now a good 10 years ago, I think it is, a special commission called Innovation for Growth. Marcus Wallenberg, now well, also then, but chairman of SEB and Saab Defense Group and also of FAM, he co-shared that group together with nobody less than Stefan Löfven, still at the time a union leader, and for EF Metall, the Industrial Workers Union. And the two of them spearheaded this study, and they produced, and then they traveled around the globe to put together the pieces of those countries and regions who were the most advanced, the most successful with various aspects of innovation. And to no surprise, they also visited Israel. And I know that Marcus Wallenberg came back from that trip filled with energy and a wish that Sweden could copy many of those mechanisms and instruments that the incentivizing schemes that exist in Israel, but not in Sweden, despite our high ranking with innovation indexes and so forth. And to that effect, the function of the chief scientist must be mentioned. It, in one way, both centralized but also streamlined the process of allowing funding in a pretty open way to startups and growing companies. And that system, and since I have Peter here, who is part of the Swedish ecosystem, the Swedish ecosystem, it has its beauties or beautiful dimensions, but it is a mosaic of agencies operating, and with sometimes too detailed priorities and less freedom of action for the individual applicants, be them innovators or startups or wherever you are in the system. And the Israeli system, it seemed, had cracked that dilemma and allowed a lot, as you could prove yourself, of course, with an interesting idea, but also with some risk capital available on your own side, so that you took a significant risk yourself or your backers. And then it was more of a generous and not so in detail scrutinizing system that would then allow also government funding to come into place. I think that was the most significant takeaway from the Israeli system. I know it has improved since in the 10 years that has passed since the EVA Innovation for Growth study was published. But it was also something that then brought Mr. Wallenberg to come back on numerous occasions to Israel. And maybe most notably, every year we take our major corporate clients of the bank, SEB, at chairman and CEO level, and we bring them to interesting places on earth. And and having been to Silicon Valley and numerous places in China and Korea and other fast-moving places, Mr. Wallenberg decided that this group of eminent business leaders should go to Israel to dig into the startup nation and the startup community there, and I think that was a huge success. It also, actually, surprisingly for some, meant that these business leaders also came to know the complexities of the region and the tensions therein. Some of them, it was actually the first time that they visited both Israel and the Palestinian territories, for instance, which is, I think, is also, of course, I'm biased because I've worked a lot there, but I think it's also an important add-on to understand what is driving Israel. Also, yeah. So, but since then, I think we have the bureaucratic system of Sweden in it again in its beauty has worked slowly to implement quite a number of the takeaways from the innovation for growth. And of course, Mr. Löfven then became Swedish Prime Minister. He set up his Innovation Council, much according to the Innovation for Growth study. And more locally, we have seen something we already had in place in in Silicon Valley, namely a tech scout, and the function of Anne-Marie Fineman, who might be with us today. But slowly but surely, that function is helping us to create the necessary bridges between the Israeli ecosystem with its strength and the Swedish system with its strength. And hopefully that will take us a very long way going forward. We have also seen even more recently the Business Sweden and I think Vinnova is also, and I should mention Vinnova in this Tech Scout function, so that they are seen as the drivers and the responsible agency in that context. On the so-called connector, which is more of a Business Sweden-driven entity, is also happening and is hopefully also, as the name alludes to, constituting a bridge between Sweden and Israel. And of course, having Peter here with me, it's worth mentioning RISE and its function closer to academia, I would say, and the possibility of RISE to be a meeting place between big business in Sweden and Israeli startup and innovation environment, and not least in the test bed environment that is a critical factor, of course. Even more concretely, because you can have as many of these government or semi-government agencies trying to act as catalysts as you want to, but of course the real action happens when you have the companies themselves doing this. And I'm happy to note that, which is now long in the making, I would say, the Drive Tel Aviv with its Volvo participation is a very elaborated and promising project. Even more recently, the AstraZeneca digital acceleration project, which was launched in last November, is also something, and of course we are more closely related to AstraZeneca, something that we believe a lot in, will take AstraZeneca into the digital age, and we all know that is in many respects the answer to many of the challenges that we face today. So with that, I'm all ears to engage with you. I could, since I ended my days as a diplomat in Abu Dhabi, being ambassador there, I'm happy to note that with the Abraham's Accords, also a new dimension, a new dynamic has started in the Middle East and with the Gulf countries, and putting behind us some of the political tensions, some of the challenges, and hopefully allowing economic cooperation to push forward the outstanding issues that we still see looming in the region. So I'm very optimistic. I know already in my days in Abu Dhabi there were things happening under the table or behind the scenes, maybe a more appropriate description, and that can now come to its full potential. And I think that will also create new links, a new understanding with the wider Arab community around the globe. So with that, I'm more than interested to hear your comments, actually, than asking me tricky questions. But I try to do that as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Magnus. Very, very interesting introductions and insightful comments also, both to the Wallenberg Group and history, and of course interest in the current day Israel. I have a personal question first from RISE perspective, and the role of RISE, I think, can play a very important active role here in verifying technologies that we see and find on behalf of Swedish industry in Israel and elsewhere. And we have actually run a couple of very interesting studies, in particular in the biotech field, actually, coupling to the Swedish bio green gold in northern Sweden and the biorefining activities there. At the same time, we see great inspiration from the Israeli way of running innovation. And do you want to point at any examples in Sweden which you see follow the Israeli way of mixing, I would say, both capital, entrepreneurship, and I would argue also the gut to bet on winners, because that's one of the traits I see in Israel, the opportunity to both mix your own capital and some support and go with real funding and not to distribute it to many potential winners, but choose early and bet boldly, and of course fail quickly in order to invest in other opportunities. But this mixture of capital, entrepreneurship, and power to invest. Do you see these activities increasing in Sweden as well?
Yes, I and I'm not a venture capitalist myself, so I will say probably stupid things as well. But I know that with the already the early successes we had in the first wave of success with IT, as it was, the IT bubble. Actually, the IT bubble, I think, learned a lot of lessons for individuals. I think the institutional investors became very cautious after the IT bubble, because when in the late 90s everything went through the roof and then bursted. Those institutional investors, and I think that's still the case in their boardrooms, remember that, and they are too cautious. But those who actually made it and survived the crash at the time, and they have been the ones seeing the opportunities also going forward. And of course, some of them, if we look at the Skype success, and the people behind the Skype, they were then creating a culture of that everything is possible, and they also put their money to it. And I think that is what has happened in Silicon Valley, and I think also in Israel. So you have much more readily available capital, taking more risk, and not going to too many board meetings and PowerPoint presentations before they actually apply the financial power. And I think that takes time. It has happened in Israel, it has happened in Silicon Valley, and it is happening in Sweden. So it's getting better, but again, I think the agility of those, and of course we have been blessed with further success in the Spotify and now the Klarna and iSettle, and those individuals behind those, they have a lot of money, and they think it's great fun to continue to invest and see maybe their juniors rise and shine, and I think that is it takes 30, 40 years to create these youngsters grow up, they become rich and able, and they groom other young individuals and it takes more than a generation to get that in place, those individuals, that thinking. And of course it must be matched with the proper, the relevant incentives from government side. So I mean, personal options is being one little example of things that we need to put in place in the Swedish system, because otherwise these, as we have seen, they move out, because where you have better incentives to kind of reap the harvest of your risk-taking. Way to go. I think what is good that we have, like in Israel, we have good education, we have good higher education, it's an egalitarian society, so it's not kind of based on the fact that you come from a certain environment or even a certain school. Everybody is up for the game. So I think that is what I hope will continue and also will accelerate and will make both Israel and Sweden to be the places to go to.
And I do think that the role models and entrepreneurs who reinvest is a critical factor. I think that's a very wise comment. Marie-Claire, do we have any comments in the chat?
We do. Do you want to give the floor to the ambassador?
As a tradition is here in the Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Ambassador Ilan Ben-Don, if you have any comments, please go ahead and ask your question to Magnus. Noah, you always have good comments here, and we are very happy for you joining, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you for your presentation and for everything that you and the Wallenberg family is doing and has been doing in the last, for so many years. Just two short observations. First of all, one has to think also about the, I would say, cultural aspect of innovation, and in this sense, in this respect, I believe that there is still a lot to be done by bringing people together. As we think about innovation, we think also about the ability to think out of the box, and it requires certain abilities that I believe that both young Swedes and young Israelis share. But I do believe that there is that we also should think about this component of bringing people together, because we know that bringing people together creates new ideas and new and innovation. This is one in a nutshell, one observation. The second one is that. You mentioned you're absolutely right by mentioning the new developments in our region in the Middle East, and you mentioned we believe that we should speak about in this respect also about the day after, because as we all know, this wonderful process that we have seen recently with 3 Arab nations will go on, and you mentioned it that under the radar there are already business relations with many other countries in the region, and I believe that opens so many new opportunities. Especially in the field of innovation. I think that this is one has to think about in this respect about the future and the near future, which will be very, very interesting and will be a great challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Great to see you. Hope to see you in real life soon again. I cannot agree more. I think we need to, and I take your question also that we need to think more strategically, long-term in terms of having relationships between our 2 nations. And of course, in the good old days, if I put it like that, you had the kibbutz tradition, which was in itself such a such a bearer of our respective societies and cross-fertilization in all aspects of the world. And I think we need to find something similar. And I know there are tech kibbutz and digital kibbutz, and I think that is something we should really start thinking more about. I think there would be an enormous appetite, and again, against the backdrop of some diffused tension maybe, and less high-pitched rhetorics about the political issues, that appetite would probably come back, if I put it almost a little bit bluntly, and we should be there to think in those terms, having exchanges among students, high school students, university students, and make sure that people experience our respective societies and ideas. So I think that, and then before Peter will make a comment, since I also sit on the board of the Swedish pavilion of the World Exhibition in Dubai, taking place in Dubai. It was supposed to have started a few weeks ago. We all know why it did not, but and still being named Expo 2020. It will now start in 2021 in October, and God willing, we have come far in our fight against the virus, and having been able to distribute vaccines sufficiently, at least, so that people would not be scared to go to Dubai. And I think that would be another platform for, of course, for Israel to display itself in a region where it was previously not welcome, but also more for us locally in this association or this Chamber of Commerce. The Swedish-Israeli dimension of that could well be displayed, and it will put the great mind of the chairman to think how that could be utilized, because I think it's a wonderful window. And I think in October, if it's not already the case, we are sick and tired of this COVID, and in October next year we might actually be able, that in a safe way, to lead a somewhat more normal life and engage physically. And I think the Expo 2020 again in 2021 will be such an opportunity. So.
I think that is a great comment on its own right. And at the Chamber of Commerce, we think very hard about how to engage people and young people in getting to know the Israeli way. And I think, commenting on Robert Friedman's question here, who's also on the board of directors of the Chamber of Commerce, Robert asked about the next step to increase the exchange between our societies. And I think what you allude to, an exchange program within the tech sectors, between the tech sectors, where the future is of our societies. I think Israeli can come here and get inspired by aspects of the sustainable transformation of industry, for example, where there is a lot of entrepreneurship needed and already existing. But if we can get some of the Israeli digital way of handling big, hairy problems into the transformational industry that is going on here, spearheaded by the hybrid program and other initiatives, I think that can be a very interesting complement to Swedes in the tech sector going to Israel, learning about their way of functioning. So I think the future kibbutz exchange program should be between incubators and science parks, the modern kibbutzes of our societies. And that is an area where we as a Chamber of Commerce are eager to play an active role. And actually, as we speak, we have just recruited our first intern to work for the Chamber of Commerce with our communication platforms. And of course, in that internship would be very fruitful to add a tech trip to Israel, or a field trip to Israel, That has not been promised to the intern yet, but we are of course looking for other supporters of our Chamber of Commerce who can co-fund such a program. So there will be opportunities announced via our updated web, which will come in January, February, on these opportunities, which we believe very strongly in, because I think just as the Kibbutz program showed, people carry the cultural change and these initiatives. Any other comments we should mention from the audience?
Evelyn has a question.
Evelyn, I think that is an old hand actually. I think that connected to our initial problems here on the technology.
Want to comment on the defense?
Yeah, we also have a question for you, Magnus, on do you see an increased opportunity for collaborations within defense industry? As one example.
Yeah, of course it is a more sensitive subject. I know, well, for completely different historical reasons, of course, we have formidable defense industries in both countries. And I, or the family, is well represented in the Swedish one. I also think that the Abraham Accords will open up the avenues for increased collaboration between Sweden and Israel in that respect. And of course there are sensitivities in the Swedish political domestic landscape, no big secret. But I think technological ingenuity finds its way, and we are all working towards to solve the same challenges, and I think that in itself will lead to a more closer collaboration. So I think it will happen. Sometimes we are formidable competitors out there, which is in exporting defense material, but we always say we welcome competition. Without competition, we would be losers. So we think that is also something that we encourage, and we are very inspired by the advances that the Israeli defense industry over and over has made, and it's a source of inspiration for our engineers as well. And I do hope that with reduced political tensions, a kind of a relaxed atmosphere on these issues, the Swedish and Israeli defense industries can also collaborate more. It's not that it's not happening, but it could also be further expanded. Yes.
What do you believe the Swedish ecosystem is missing? What could we possibly sort of pick from the Israeli brains, or relevant in this case?
Yeah, I think again back to this chief scientist. If you look at on the government side, a more streamlined process, less how should I say, less involvement actually of bureaucrats in setting the priorities. We have this what we in Swedish system call strategic innovation platforms, I think it is, and it's a beautiful reflection of the existing industrial base, and they try to cluster resources, government financing, commercial business competence, and push them forward. On top of that, you have the ambition with the themes of digitalization and sustainability. We all agree on those. They are critical. But sometimes I think the matrix becomes too complex, and you have to be, spot on in fulfilling too many conditions in order to be interesting, and you have to spend too much time filling in your application forms and fulfilling all these criteria. Skip that, be more trust the innovators, trust the startups, and put your mind to it. And then on the other side, as we did already touched upon, the incentivizing schemes, with whether it be personal options or some, variation thereof. I think we need to come to that. Otherwise, we will just see people leave for other destinations because they can make more money there. And finally, on the it's the. I think what is beautiful with Israel is also the availability of financing. In some cases, it's a function of the relationship with the U.S. and the intimate, connection with the U.S. financial system, so to speak, and the knowledge in the U.S. of Israel and what's going on there, which kind of naturally attracts risk-willing capital. I think that's my final point.
With that, I would like to conclude, and thank you so much again, Magnus Schöldtz. If those of you who are comfortable at this time of the day, turn on your cameras, and we will give Mr. Magnus Schöldtz a big hand and a virtual applaud. And we can't wait to see you all in real life, of course. The new year will give us that opportunity. But meanwhile, we will continue perfecting our webinars and continue with these hybrid meetings. We are 4 in this room, which is on the limit, I think, on this time in Stockholm. We will be more in these rooms soon during the spring, I'm sure. And as a special opportunity for members, you are welcome to our hybrid webinars during the spring as soon as the conditions allow. So again, thank you so much, Magnus. Very interesting discussion, insightful discussion, and being one of the latest industrial member actually of our Chamber of Commerce. I'm looking forward to continue direct dialogue with yourself as planning for further activities. So thank you all, and have a great end of the year. Merry Christmas and Happy Chanukah wherever you are in the world, and we'll get back to you early in January with new opportunities and new insightful discussions. So thank you all.
Thank you.